Okay, so like when the market rate is greater than the interest rate of a bond, it means that the market thinks that the bond should actually have a higher interest rate than what it's issued at. So there's going to be a discount on the bond because there's someone on the market that would lend that money um, for a higher interest rate. So then the original lender borrows that money. I don't know actually how the system works, to be honest. It's some financial stuff, but essentially something happens. There's like a third party actually. Um, so like they resell the debt at like a higher rate. Um, if I'm not exactly sure if that's correct, but what happens is it's not really necessarily like a bonder, but the bond issuer, as in like the person that issued the bond who borrowed the money, and then the bond holder are the investor who lends the money. So like there's two sides of this. The bond holder is the one that lends the money, so to speak. But there's like another party where the actual funds come from. But like for the bond holder, the investor that lends the money, this would be a bond receivable. For the bond issuer, the one that borrowed the money, this would be a bond payable. But then there would be a discount on this bond. So like for example, let's say if you want to just take a look at the issuer with the bond payable, if there's a discount per se, they would both receive a discount. Both would be a discount on the bond. But what it means by the discount is that the bond holder, the investor, is actually sort of like getting a discount in the sense that they're going to have to give out less money for the same amount of bond receivable. Like they give out $1 million, so to speak, the bond receivable for $1 million, but they only have to give out 980,000 in cash, so to speak. So there will be a discount on the bonds of 20,000. And then the bond issuer, the one that borrowed the money, they would only receive 980,000 in cash, and there would be a 20,000 discount on the bonds payable. So like that's what they would receive is a discount on the bonds receivable, and like the actual amount of cash they receive because they want cash because they're borrowing cash. But instead of the full $1 million in cash, they only received 980,000 in cash, and then they also received this $20,000 discount on the bonds receivable, so to speak. That's both debited. But they have this bond receivable. They have this bond payable of $1 million, so they still have to pay $1 million at the end of the maturity of the bond. Let's say this bond is for 20 years, right? So, if it's for 20 years, this discount on the bonds payable will be amortized. So like let's say like every year it's $1,000 of amortization for the discount of the bonds payable. So what happens is that the bonds also have an interest rate. So then but the interest rate doesn't pay off the principal. Like there might be something in there that says they have to pay off parts of the principal. Maybe if they pay off parts of the principal, the interest is going to go down. Like you'll pay less interest over the course of the bond. Um, or there could be like compound. It could be compound interest, like as in like the interest compounds and adds to the principal over the lifetime of the loan of the bond. Um, or it could be simple, where it doesn't compound and instead the principal remains the same over the lifetime of the bond. But essentially what happens for the bond issuer who borrows the money, there would be an interest expense. So like they would have to debit the interest expense. For example, let's say like there's some kind of interest rate on the $1 million loan. Um, so like that interest would have to get paid. Let's say like it's a certain amount, like 4,000 really, because like the discount on the bonds payable is going to be paid along every single year along with the interest expense. So like if the this is like actually the amortization of the discount on bonds payable. So amortization of the discount on the bonds payable. Every year there's amortization. So like $1,000. So not only are they paying the interest on this loan in the interest expense, but they're also paying the amortization of the discount on the bonds payable, so to speak. So it adds to the interest expense. So like let's say like yeah they have to pay like 4,000 um, in cash, and then the amortization of the bonds payable $1,000. Because it's not really like them paying. It's not like the amortization of the discount on the bonds payable. The discount on the bonds payable is a contra account. It's like a contra expense account most likely. So it's not that they're repaying the discount, so to speak. It's just the discount itself is being amortized over the course of the lifetime of the bond. So like it's not so like the discounts are like amortizes over that course of the bond, but then they have to also pay the expense, the interest expense. But then the amortization of the discount bonds payable is also part of the interest expense. So like let's say like the interest expense is 4,000 per payment period, semi-annually, annually. So it gets amortized, but they would also pay that interest expense. So like over the course of this bond, I guess there's 20 payment periods. And over those 20 periods, the full discount would be fully amortized by the end of it. And then they would pay like the interest expense, which would not reduce the principal. So at the time of maturity of the bond, they still would have to pay the actual principal of the bond itself, which is $1 million, which would finally get rid of the bond payable of $1 million. So that would close out the bond and the bond. Of course, they could pay it off early and do redemption and see if there's like a gain or sell. Like they could see if like if you get a better rate on it. I forgot what it's called. Refinance. I think it's called. You could refinance it or something. So if they refinance it and they get a better interest rate, then they might have like a gain or a loss on redemption. But at the end of the day, what happens is like the discount on the bonds payable is just a temporary contra account. It's going to be an expense account for them that is just like a filler that is part of the bond payable, is discount of the bonds payable. But so they receive that discount, but the thing is they're receiving only 980,000 in cash. But at the end of the maturity of the bond, they still have to pay the full amount of the bond itself, $1 million. Yeah, you can see. And then the bond holder, the investor who lends the money, right? They would have the bond receivable $1 million, but they would only have to give out 980,000 in cash, and they would also have a $20,000 on the discount of the bonds payable, on the bonds receivable. So like they would receive that as an interest revenue. They would receive that as revenue. They receive cash as well as the discount of the amortization, which would be the discount on the bond, which would be amortized over the course of the bond. But by the time of the bond maturity, they would receive the cash of $1 million to close out their bond receivable from the bond issuer who's borrowed the money. So the discount, so to speak, if you guys want to think about it, is actually for, so to speak, like the bond holder, the person that lent the money, because they would actually give out less money. to lend out money, pretty much. So in the next video, I'm going to do one where there's a premium on the bond.